Where's your yellow line? Think about that. You might be thinking, well, I don't play a role. And sometimes some of my staff members would say that, well, I don't play a role. But is that really true? No, you do play a role. If your mission is in your company, whether you own the company, whether you're one of the team members, is to make people happy or deliver quality food, be helpful and friendly, and make them feel at home. We think of those type of visions and missions when we think of hospitality. Whatever the mission is, your role, the role you're tasked to play, requires you to put on some costume, does it not? Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a shorty episode for you, and today I want to start out sharing a story about Disney and their behind the yellow line experience. So let me explain what this is, and then I want to share a story about it. Behind the Yellow Line is like a behind the scenes kind of tour where they pull back the curtain and show you behind the yellow line. First off, let me explain that Disney has all these entrances for staff where they enter the park, and that's all over the park. So if you've been to Disney, you know that there's some like scaffolding, some walls, almost like a backstage stage door kind of thing, where any place that they have that, before the staff crosses over and goes through that door, that entrance, there's a yellow line. And all that means is that is the symbolic symbol that they have gone on stage. So this concept of the yellow line, the concept is as soon as they cross that yellow line, they're on stage. So behind the yellow line, they're off stage, and it's all the things that happen behind the scenes. So when you go on this tour, you're seeing all the things that are happening backstage. But the concept of this is in place. So that's a metaphor. It's a symbol. It is a paradigm shift where when they cross that yellow line, no matter whether they are playing Cinderella, Mickey Mouse, or they're selling hot dogs at one of the stands on Main Street, once they cross that yellow line, they are on stage. And we'll get back to what that means in a minute. But let me share with you somebody who told me about their experience with the Behind the Yellow Line tour. They said that as they were going through the park, because the tour starts out with walking through the various areas within the Disney park. And they're walking, they're being escorted by characters, by staff members, and they have that experience with the cast members. So Snow White happened to be one of the characters that was on this particular experience where this person was, who was telling me the story, as well as some of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And for the person that was telling the story, he said this, that he said to Snow White, hey, Snow White, let me ask you a question and tell me the truth. Who's that in the dopey costume? And the inquiry was that he was wanting to know who was playing the part. He wanted to understand more about who was playing that part. And so Snow White replied, sorry, that's Dopey. And he's like, hey, yeah, I know. But who is that? Who's inside that costume? And she just kept saying, I don't know what you mean, sir. That's Dopey. And she didn't go any further than that, despite all of his pressure to answer the question in a different way. And so they got to the part of the tour where they actually went backstage and went behind the yellow line. And then the character, the actress that was playing the role of Snow White, said to the person who asked the question, now I can't answer your question. Now, I bet you're all wondering what the answer was, right? But I'm not going to tell you. Because the point of this story is that only until they got behind the yellow line or backstage would that actress come out of character when she crossed over the yellow line and was behind the yellow line. She was Snow White when she crossed over the yellow line into the park and acting as if she was portraying that role of Snow White. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, that makes sense when we talk about a character like that. But if you're thinking, well, that's nothing special about there's nothing special about somebody selling hot dogs on Main Street that they need to do or say or act in a different way. But I challenge you, is that true? I don't think so. And what I submit to you is this. If you think about the model and the vision and the mission of Disney and what they are about, their motto is that they are the happiest place on earth. And they aim to make the happiest experience or create the happiest experience for all of their guests. That's their mission, to make people happy. So part of being able to do that is ensuring that they are always taking on those roles fully that contribute to delivering on that mission, delivering on that vision. And so to answer that question would have been out of character for Snow White for anyone to divert from the role that they are cast to play in creating your happy experience. It would be diverting from that, and that would not be on stage appropriate. So why this is important as a concept, and I often talk about this when I'm speaking with people who are customer facing or working with people who work in customer service. In my customer service team over the years, this is one of the concepts that I've always used in training, where I would ask, where's your yellow line? Think about that. You might be thinking, well, I don't play a role. And sometimes some of my staff members would say that, well, I don't play a role. But is that really true? No, you do play a role. If your mission is in your company, whether you own the company, whether you're one of the team members, is to make people happy or deliver quality food, be helpful and friendly, and make them feel at home. We think of those type of visions and missions when we think of hospitality. Whatever the mission is, your role, the role you're tasked to play, requires you to put on some costume, does it not? To take on some characteristics that may or may not be something you're feeling at that moment. And what I mean is, if your role is to be friendly and to be welcoming, but you're not feeling it that day, you've got to do something to get in that role, to have those characteristics. And think about it. I mean, we understand. You think everybody feels friendly or happy at every moment of the day, or wanting to be friendly or courteous or happy at every moment of the day? No, definitely not. And so many people who work and provide or take on that role are tasked with, that is their job to take on that role, to be happy, to be polite, to be welcoming, to be positive. Whether they own their own company, whether they're working for a company, some people, many people, do something that they are not truly stepping into that character or stepping into that role. They're actually acting like they're backstage instead of on stage. And I bet you can recall even some of your own experiences as a customer with employees or with staff members or team members that didn't get on stage, that didn't assume that role. If they are acting like they're backstage instead of on stage, we can all understand why that wouldn't deliver what they are tasked to deliver. That wouldn't be a role worth paying attention to. And actually, it might cause some friction. Somebody who doesn't feel like being friendly and isn't friendly and is dealing with customers, it's not going to be a good experience for either one of them, quite frankly, but definitely not for the customer. That's the acceptance of that role. So making the analogy fit here is that what is so important about understanding this analogy and have it fit is that we all have a role to play no matter what we do. So if you're a coach, or if you're a business owner, or if you're tasked with delivering products or services to clients, and you haven't taken on that role, fully embraced and stepped into that role, then there's no way you're going to be able to pull it off. I even liken it to myself. If I don't take on the role of trainer, educator, inspirational, motivational teacher, there's no way I'm going to be able to engage or deliver what I'm tasked to do. If I'm standing in front of 10 or 20 or hundreds of people speaking to them, I better have done my work to put that costume on, to take on that role. Now, let me say this because I don't want you to misunderstand. A lot of people might say and respond to this as, well, but that's not authentic. The challenge here is that if my role is to stand here and speak to you, to entertain you, to engage you, to educate you, if I'm not prepared or I haven't prepped myself on taking on that role of however you look at me, entertainer, educator, motivational speaker, I am not going to be able to perform that task. I'm not going to be able to deliver on it. So we all have an obligation to play a role. And it's not put on, it's we are taking on the character to deliver that role. If you speak to anyone who acts, I promise you, think about this or read about this anywhere. There are people who actually in their method, whether that's called method acting or whatever method they use to get completely into character. There are actors, of course, who've had to lose weight or gain weight in order to take on a role. But sometimes there are examples where if they have to speak in an accent, in order to do that, they've had to live that. They had to take that on, not just while they were reading their lines, but really embody that character. Really study it and understand what it looks like to be able to deliver that succinctly and authentically. If you're faced with it, let's go back to Disney. If we're faced with a Disney employee who hasn't done that work and doesn't have a smile on their face and isn't friendly, they will not deliver on that mission of being the happiest place on earth. That is their role to play. That's their part. And whether that's a person working at Disney or you in your own role that you are tasked with playing or that you are cast to play, we all have a choice whether or not we want to play that role, right? If people choose to work there, they're accepting that role. If you are starting that business, you're accepting that role. Now, what I would task you to check or challenge yourself to understand is that once you accept that role, which means you take the job or you start the company or whatever the case may be, you accept how many people, and you can understand how many people that you've encountered, you see, that are acting, not in character, but out of character to what they're supposed to deliver. Somebody who's not friendly, not energetic, and that's what they're tasked with being. That's the role they play because they haven't done their work to prepare themselves and step into that role. They won't be able to deliver. When they're out of character, they won't be able to deliver. So, coming back to me, I would not be able to do what I do if I didn't ensure that I put that costume on, that I stepped into that role. I mean stepping into the role of taking on the character to deliver what my job is, to deliver to you, to educate, to inspire, to teach, to train, to motivate, to enlighten. So, thinking about this, Ask yourself, where's your yellow line? I'll give you a hint. If you have a job, it should be right before you walk in your office or your place of work. If you're a CEO and you own a company, it's gotta be before you walk into the building. If you're a salesperson, it better be before you walk into your next prospect or client's office. If you're a service or guest services member, it better be before you walk into wherever you are accepting or seeing customers, whether that's on the phone or in person. If you work in hospitality, it better be the moment you get on site, whether that's in a restaurant or in a theme park like Disney or in a hotel. You can't cross that yellow line unless you're in character and on stage. Putting on that costume to not act, to embody that role that you have been cast to play. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Finding the Upside. Bye for now, friends.